Hi, Barbara.
Hi, how are you, Julie?
I am well, thanks. How you doing?
I am well also.
Good. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Dana.
Hi, Julie. Hi, Barbara.
Hi. We have
Uh,
library tonight, right?
Yes. Yep. And then whatever updates Tony has.
And also it said cultural and recreation and
Right. Those
say,
are the budgets that we went over with Tony,
right.
the recreation department, the sailing program, all
Right,
those.
exactly.
Hi, Allison.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are
Allison.
you?
Hi.
Hi, Sharon.
Hey,
How are you?
fine, thank you.
Hi, Sharon.
How about yourself? Hi, everybody.
Doing
It's
well.
really interesting that there were two Florence Johnsons.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yep.
Uh,
I have
So-
Kathleen Atkinson is researching Flossie for us to see where she may have gone to school. But I did know that she never married.
But I'm wondering how it was possible there'd be two Florence. I mean, was Florence that common a name?
I believe the other Florence was a cousin,
Okay.
because there's another,
Oh, okay.
there's so many Johnsons. And this is the problem. And I think Sharon is laughing already. They named their children or their nephews after each other or close enough that it just drives me crazy.
Yeah, I went into doing the family tree for my kids and the same thing, two brothers, they each name their children the same things. And of course, if they have one child and that child passes away as a baby, then the next one that comes along, they might name the same one, or one further down, they might name it.
Oh, yeah.
My other brother, Daryl.
Right,
Exactly,
exactly.
my other
Bob,
brother, Daryl.
exactly. So, I mean, the Johnsons, all you have to do is say the last name of Johnson, and I roll my eyes and I go, of course, let me get the records out. The Johnsons at the Historical Society have their own drawer in the file cabinet. It's just Johnson, not J, Johnson. That's how many of them there are.
For those of you who aren't following this, we've been tracking down the teacher, Florence Johnson, who did the stunning pressed flower arrangements that the library has framed, and that we're focusing, the Historical Society is also focusing on how to find out more about her and how she learned so much about botany. And if you have a chance, are those up? They're up, right?
Yeah, they've all been digitized. You can see the collection on Digital Commonwealth. You can search directly for Florence Johnson Herbarium on Google and it will come up, as will a little PowerPoint that I put on our YouTube channel explaining what it's all about. This year, it's part of a 2-year grant to do some work around preserving and interpreting the plant collection. And this year we're working with school.
Right.
In April, we'll be at the school to talk about a children's book that's about resilience. So it's very appropriate coming out of COVID, called The Hugging Tree. And then in May, we're coming back and we're going to teach the kids to press plants. And so we'll make our own little herbarium similar to what was done in 1897 with Johnson School, with Nahant Elementary School students under Florence, Miss Flossie Johnson.
Miss Flossie, right.
Ms. Flossie.
And the thing is that the children who did them were in a one-room schoolhouse. So their ages ranged from 8 to 15, and they all worked on this project together.
Right, and we have evidence that sometimes they paired up and went off island and picked something and brought it back. There's evidence of somebody that went overseas, whether it was a parent or whatever, and brought back some plants from Miss Flossie to press. But a number of them, about 184 of them, went together to the Mass Horticultural Society for a show, and it won a prize in its category, all of $6, which in today money is about $200.
That's right.
So,
Okay.
you know,
So
very, very exciting.
jumping off the money comment, I think we have a quorum.
We do.
So let's call this to order. So we have Vanderslice Beatty. We are joined by the librarian. Dana is here. We are joined by Allison. John Fulgham is here. Judy Zahora, DeWitt Brown, Jeff Lewis. I assume it's Vi, even though it says Vi and Mark.
It's actually
And Julie.
Mark's
Excuse
here Mark is here on behalf of the sailing program. I had reached out to him.
Okay, so it may be both.
Yeah.
And John, I had a meeting that ran until like quarter of, so I'm still finishing my dinner. May
Mhm.
I ask if you could kind of be the master of ceremonies at least until I?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so we had on the agenda to talk through discussions with the library and other culture and recreation buckets. I had reached out to Mark and he wants to potentially jump in with respect to the sailing program. I had also reached out to Jennifer McCarthy with the Town Recreation Parks League. She seemed to be content with the budget as it looks so far. So she didn't necessarily need to weigh in. And I think Tony can give us an update with respect to the veterans and the Council on Aging. So I think we'll take things kind of out of order and jump right in with Sharon and the library.
Okay,
go
before we
ahead.
start, Sharon, and you'll appreciate this, I just want to say, John, the document archive is wonderful.
Okay, good.
It's easy to access. The folders all make sense. So thank you very much. It really
Sure.
works.
Okay, good. That's great.
You're welcome. In terms of what we did with the herbarium, thank you very much for your kind words.
Beautiful.
We are looking to do something similar with another LSTA grant next year. So our application for that has been submitted, and we'll be waiting to hear by this summer whether we receive funding to do that. We'll be looking to enumerate our many artworks and artifacts in the library and interpret them for school students and others. So there will be programming. We are expecting COVID to be over so that we can begin again with in-person programming. And some of that will begin with outdoor programming in May. So keep an ear out for that. In terms of our budget, there's been a placeholder for the children's librarian position on the classification salary plan for over a decade that I've gone back and looked. That position, a salaried position, has been unfilled due to being underfunded for at least 6 years, which is before I came on. A library assistant had been doing some of the work in the children's department. And when I came on, the trustees were pushing at that point to have another position added on. And they mentioned to me the idea of having a fully qualified children's librarian. At the last town meeting, we were also interested in fully funding the position of reference and adult services librarian. And so that position was added to the classification plan, but no equivalent funds were added to the library budget. So that position has been filled by Carolyn, who has been underpaid and operating under the classification library assistant, which is close to a minimum wage position. Her pay has now increased this year using money that would have gone to the children's library assistant. So currently that position is unfunded, and 2 of us have run the library since July 7th. In September, Mark Cullinan said he'd like to make the library a priority in the coming year. And then at a December 1st library board meeting, he said he'd like to fully fund the library if possible, but offered a possible compromise of working with the Johnson School on a joint hire. Johnson School is interested in the idea, which is being put before the full school committee tonight, as we speak, for discussion at their next meeting. It's just being introduced as a possibility tonight. The Johnson School has $4,957 in its budget for library staffing. That would still leave us short another $5,000 to $6,000. In the meantime, other lines on the library's budget were funded below recommendation, but we are primarily talking about fully funding that position. Let's see, by comparison, the per hour pay for a children's librarian in surrounding communities as of 2018 looked like this. Marblehead, the starting pay was $26.48 an hour. Swampscott is $24.21 an hour. Lynn, it's $21.17 per hour. Linfield, it's $20.77 per hour as a starting pay. The library is asking for $20.51, slightly less than all of them, as a starting salary, which is the equivalent of $40,000 a year. The unfunded assistant position is currently $15.60. And as I said, we cannot currently pay because that money went to fund the adult services librarian. So I also want to remind the committee, even if the town were to fully fund the budget as proposed by the Library Board of Trustees, the library's budget would still be only 1.9% or less of the total town budget. So that 1.9% is comparing our budget to what the prospective revenue was going to be in the current fiscal year, not knowing how much that would go up in the future fiscal year. So that's where we are. The assistant's wages on the budget are currently less than half of the request, which would fully fund Carolyn, but not a children's librarian. And by the way, does not reflect a 2% raise to Carolyn's position. The assistant's appointed was actually lowered to $7,660. That's our page position. That is a minimum wage position. Minimum wage does not go up by 2%. It goes up from, I believe, from $12.75 to $13.50 next calendar year. So it is forcing us to reduce that position. It's normally a 12-hour week position and would reduce it to 10. Longevity bonuses were restored. They had been incorrect according to the employee handbook. Purchase of services is level funded. Operation equipment, repair and maintenance is level funded. It's a bit of a problem because I'll explain in a moment. The materials budget is a state requirement. The state requires that we spend 19.5% of our operating budget on materials that circulate. Those materials are expressed in our budget as books, magazines, newspaper subscriptions, and audiovisual. Those added up together in best case would equal 19.5% of the budget. They don't. They fall short by about $2,000. In the interest of trying to be fiscally conservative, I originally did that, knowing that we would have to make up $2,000 from other sources. We do get state aid, which this year will probably be $4,000. State doesn't worry about where that money comes from. They worry about the total amount. Without making that amount, we could potentially fall out of being a certified public library, and a whole lot of bad things happen, including no longer getting the state aid at all, including having no access to the catalog that we use, and having no access to materials from other libraries, so no interlibrary loaning. So we are running a tight ship. We've always run a pretty tight ship, and we've always up to now balanced our budget. With, if we went over, we used monies that were not, town monies. They were library specific funds like state aid. So I'm coming to you with this budget that the Board of Trustees, the Library Board of Trustees have recommended, and I'm interested in your thoughts and questions. Thank you for listening for a long, drawn out description.
Well, I know that I think Barbara and Julie sat down with you. So if they want to start from the FinCom perspective, I'm happy to let them do that. And then I think the other members can weigh in. I mean, one of the things that I would want to know is just in the context of COVID and in the services that are being offered by the library in terms of how the staffing logistics are working to serve those needs. Is it different? Was it different last year? I'm sure it absolutely was. And how do you project it to be different in the year going forward?
Sure. Yes, it's definitely different. Right now, we are open by appointment only, 5 people at a time, aside from staff. They come in for 50 minutes and we clean touch points in the 10 minutes before the next group. So circulation is down, visits are down. If we had to be down a person, this is probably the year. Thank God there was a pandemic since we have fewer staff, but that also means that we have had to cut back on things. And what we've mostly cut back on are programs. Of course, we couldn't do in-person programs, but there was the possibility of doing outdoor distance programs. Those have had to go away. The idea of doing a lot of promotions of the few programs that we did try, no time to do that. We have picked up whatever pieces we could of the children's department, primarily purchasing materials. So Carolyn is doing all the purchasing right now. And I'm doing grants and budgets, and I'm shelving books on Mondays on the day that we're closed to public. That's usually a pages position, but we don't have it, so I'm doing it. Those primarily are what are going on. If once we are to reopen, and even if right now I could hire a children's librarian, that person would be doing a lot of liaison with the school, would be doing a lot of things online, reaching out to student groups and building rapport with kids coming up. It would be possible to do consistent online book talks and story times with young children. All those kinds of things could have been going on right now in anticipation of mounting up a full program in the fall. We are going into summer reading program, which looks like, again, it will be all online. And I'm pulling together those programs, but you know, the enrollment went down slightly last summer. I anticipate it will still be low this coming summer. The time that it takes to do the promoting, particularly personally one-on-one, has to fall away because there's only so many hours, man hours a week that Carolyn and I can accomplish.
How many children are there in Nahant? I mean, how many children are in the library, use the library? And what was actually more specifically, how many children? Because I'd like to know, you said enrollment was down last summer. I'd like to know what's the rate of usage, children usage in the last couple of years, because I don't know that there are a lot of children in Nahant.
I will agree with you that this is this community, about half of the people in our population are 50 plus. And so, yes, this is primarily an adult library. In terms of the numbers of people that come in, trying to think, I think this past year we had about 8,000 walk-ins. No, so far this fiscal year, I believe we've had about 8,000 walk-ins, and I would say a small fraction of those, maybe in the area of 10% were children. But that being said, I think there's a large portion. I know we have, 125, 130 students at the school. And I know that is a fraction, maybe you know better than I, of the total number of children in this area. And of course, when we were open and doing story times, we had 20, 25 people in here participating, every other week. So I think there's an untouched, I wish I could give you more clear numbers. I'd be happy to pull those together for you. But I think there's an untouched segment of Nahant that we should be marketing towards, for lack of a better way to put it. We should be offering our more of our services in that direction. Homeschoolers, for example, we don't even know where they are because we haven't had someone in place who could do the work. I understand what needs to get done, but then when I look at, who's got the hours to do it, right now there's no one. And so it takes somebody who understands all those facets of delivering service, everything from, going out to where children are, going on the beach, going to the school, going up into the park where we've installed a story walk where children can read the pages of a book as they walk around the park, going out there and doing programming based on that. Those kinds of things are time consuming, but very rewarding and good for bringing kids to the library.
Surely, I appreciate that. But what I'm trying to say is that it's a lot of effort for a very small return. Not that they're not important, not that it wouldn't be a terrific thing, but the amount of children that we have here and the amount of effort that you're talking about, I don't know that the return is that big.
I'd be happy to look into exactly, what the demographics is for that. In what we're proposing now is to work with the school directly so that a children's librarian would go down there potentially one day a week. So that's, 125 plus students every week. But I would make more of that argument when you talk about young adult, teens and preteens. That one I did look at, and when you look at that, there are maybe 100 kids that fit that demographic in Nahant. and then you could anticipate maybe a 10th of them making their way to library. We know that that is not where we should be putting a lot of time and effort. Young adult materials are helpful to some of our young adults that are coming in here. So we're listening to those individuals that do come here to meet their needs. But I wouldn't spend a lot of time, say, doing programs to attract them, because it's a very limited number that you're going to attract. I agree with you in part. I think where we explored and did much better were programs for our very young ones, our preschool age children. And we got very good response in those programs. And then going into the summer reading program, trying to extend students. We know from studies that if children read over the summer, it tends to reinforce the learning that they've had in reading. And so they hit the ground running better in September than if they weren't reading over the summer. And so even with fallback, we had about 42 children registered last summer, the summer reading program. And many of them did come out for some of the programming that we did. Normally we get between 60 and 80 children. So, you know, I was pleasantly surprised we got as many as we had going to virtual.
Hi, Sharon. This is Dana Sheehan. I have some questions as well.
Sure.
Maybe you could tell me a little bit about the splitting of the position between the library and Johnson School. Would that be a splitting of the budget, the fully costed out of that position, you know, salary and benefits? Would that be split between the library and the school? How would that work?
The school has said that they have just under $5,000 available in school budget toward library staff. As of this moment, we have nothing drafted on the table, but the chat about it was that potentially a children's librarian could go down to the school 1 day a week, which is pretty much what the library staff person does right now there. And the idea is to take it beyond what has been done so far in library services there. I don't know when the last time was that they had a degreed librarian there. It isn't just about, you know, reading stories to kids. It's about teaching research skills, citation skills, the parts of a book, the use of our online resources and databases, how to use the catalog and reserve materials, and all of those things. Part of my concern has always been with the library and the school is that those children that graduate out in 6th grade and go to Swampscott have the skills, the library science skills that they need to be successful in middle school, that they don't start there at a deficit, because there has been perhaps, and I'm unaware of how much or how little the teachers themselves are doing, but that there be a systematic training in those areas. I have spoken to the school librarians at Johnson Middle School, did a few years ago, and am somewhat familiar with what they are teaching the kids there. And I'd like to implement that program at the school.
Okay.
With the children's librarians.
One question, going back to the cost of the position. So 5,000 coming from the school, and how much would the library fund? I mean, including benefits and salary.
Right. So far, that position has been increased by $10,000. We are looking for 20 to get that position to 40. 10 to go to Carolyn's position that's already been increased, and then 10 to go to the children's librarian. So we are currently short by 5. It has been suggested that we drop our page position and use those wages to make up. That's a tough one for me because that person relieves us at the desk so that we can get other long-term projects done without distraction. But that's where we are. So we are literally haggling right now over $5,000.
So in respect to Dana's point, so on the surface, I get that's the kind of math that we can do. But one of the things that the FinCom has done in recent time has been very tried to draw a harder line with respect to the town's addition of employees across all departments, because the creep of the associated expense of these employees is another thing that often isn't captured in the budgets, but tends to kind of swell our overall spend. And if I'm correct, if we did fund the children's librarian position at, I think it's close to 20 hours per week, then that person.
That position, that fully qualified position is 37.5. Currently, we have an assistant position in place at 37.5.
But if that person who were kind of mapping out an hourly wage were to become benefit eligible at that point, that's anywhere between another $10,000 to $20,000 that isn't kind of baked into the cake, but we're still going to have to spend. So that's one of the things that's one of the reasons that the committee is kind of very kind of recalcitrant to advocate for additional employees when there's maybe other ways potentially to.
Right. I hope you understand we're not adding an employee. We are just increasing the wages of one employee.
Okay.
That we already had on the books. Well, we've had roughly 3.5 FTEs. It's a little less than that. It's about 3.3. And so what I'm advocating for and the board has proposed is still 3.3. It's just increasing salary of that one position and making an assistant now a fully fledged children's librarian.
Sharon, this is Dan again. I apologize for asking the question again. I'm just not getting
No,
it.
it's fine.
I apologize, but so for the children's librarian, what is the fully loaded cost of that position, including benefits? It sounds like a full-time position, right?
Right. Well,
The school.
Full salaried position would be $40,000, and part of that, so per hour would be less than anybody in the area. So I'm crossing my fingers that I can hire at that, frankly. But
so 40,000 salary and the benefits, or just the salary?
The salary itself. Okay. I'm unaware of the precise dollar amount of benefits package.
And so then the 40.
Now, the assistant already was a benefited position, so that doesn't change.
Okay, so the 40,000 would include when 5,000 would come from the school potentially.
Right, that's correct.
Okay, and then the benefits would be on top of that.
That's correct.
And would it be
my operating budget doesn't show anything about benefits, so I'm just dealing with what's in front of me on operating. And
then for the other position, for Caroline's position, you're proposing a raise of $10,000 for that position and kind of redefine.
That is just to maintain that position. She is already receiving that increase. But so it prevents me from hiring anybody else because money, please recall that my budget is fluid. The town only votes on the bottom line. So what I wound up doing was robbing Peter to pay Paul, robbing Peter to pay Carolyn. And so all other positions have been unfunded currently pending the outcome of this.
Would it be acceptable to have this as a part-time position for you?
I've been asked that. Not my first choice, but I would put to you that, that a qualified librarian, children's librarian or reference librarian is a master's degree position. If I were shopping right now for a position and I had the possibility of getting full-time and benefits and part-time and be unable to pay back my loan, well,
I don't think that we can
think I'd
actually
be
make a
hard
decision
pressed.
based on that, Sharon. And frankly, I understand your need and I understand what you're trying to say. But as John said to you, we're making a lot of really hard decisions. It's not that we're not in any way opposed or not in favor of the library. And certainly, but again, back to the amount of people that this position serves based on, compared to other things that we're saying no to that serve a much broader audience, a much broader population of Nahant. That's all it is. I mean, there's choices that have to be made. And so I understand what you're saying, and I hear your passion. I know what you're looking for, and I certainly am in favor of bringing the children in. We just don't have that many, and we do have a lot of need in Nahant. And it doesn't sound like a lot of money. I understand that in the greater scheme of the budget, but it does. We have talked over the years. We're not getting an increase in revenue. We have no revenue incoming, no increase from that. So the money's got to come from somewhere. And that's the problem. We have a great need in a lot of our other services, besides the fact that with our infrastructure is in really bad shape. So we've got to make informed decisions, and they're not easy and they're not our favorite, but they are decisions we have to make.
I will put to you that we do have a history here. Actually, one was in the hiring of my position, which I learned after the fact, that the board did go out and tried to hire this position for less and didn't get enough qualified applicants. They raised it to what I receive now, and you get me for what that's worth. We did the same thing with trying to hire a children's librarian. I tried to hire based on the wages that we have available to us. And frankly, this is a very tight budget for us. I don't have a lot of wiggle room here. But even with the idea of potentially losing the page position, we went out to hire. I had other librarians, library directors who saw the ad, emailed me and said, you're not going to be able to get anyone. We actually had 2 applicants when I'm used to seeing a dozen or 15 applicants. And this was pre-COVID. Of the 2 applicants, one was clearly not qualified. The other one was highly qualified coming out of New York City. We offered her the position. She looked at the cost of living was up in this area, and she declined the position. It is merely a situation of the dollar. So I hear what you're saying. I will not speak to what other departments are asking for, or what you're funding, or how much they are impacting the community and so forth. I'm only saying it does often seem that we're being told, we love the library, we love what you do, everything's fantastic, but. And even to being told, well, next year, man, the library, we're going to take care of you. And then no. So when is it the library's turn?
Carolyn, Sharon, with regard to the children's librarian,
Yes.
I don't think this year would be an adequate question. Prior to COVID, you had a reading program monthly or weekly. How many people participated in that? How often?
Yes, we had bi-weekly children's story times. We had about 25 children anywhere from, 20 to 25 showing up each time. So it was very successful. So, we're only looking to build on that.
Thank you.
And those are good numbers for a small town. Those are
Yeah.
good numbers.
Thank you. I thought so too.
Yeah. And I also wanted to, I mean, we all understand, and we talked with you earlier about the context this year when Julie and I met with you. Just want to also note though that, the opportunity to do something collaboratively with the school is a real, that's exciting. I mean, that's something that is we want to take advantage if we can. So
I think it's also, if I may, an incentive. The school goes before the Scottsdale schools every year to renegotiate its contract with the school. And wouldn't it be helpful to know that when our children go over there, they are an asset to the school instead of something that might hold other students back? So this is one way among many in which we can help those students be fully equipped.
Excuse me, I think we need to be careful about that, Sharon, because you said you didn't know the program that the school offers. So to say that we're sending our children out ill-prepared isn't fair to our current school. Not fair until we find out what program they offer. They might not go through what you've seen in the public library, but they might have a very robust way of teaching the children how to use the library. So please don't say that about the school system.
Fine, I can say I don't comprehensively know, but I'm aware of certain things that I would teach that I know are not being taught. I'll leave it at that.
I'm just talking about it as a new opportunity for everybody, not in any kind
I
of.
think so, thank you.
Chairman, I'm a newbie here. So everything I'm hearing is for a first time. Are you a member of like a library association? Or is there a professional association that has, what goes through my head is like libraries, I think of them in every town in the United States has got a library.
Right.
And there must be some statistics or data like, FTE per capita type information. When they collect all of this 5 gazillion libraries throughout the United States, how many FTEs per capita? Is there some sort of number? Or how much from library funding is revenue per capita? In your particular case, it's expense, but there's got to be something that says, well, how much revenue is spent on libraries per capita? I don't even know what Nahant's per capita is. Are we like 3,700 now? Does anybody know our population?
Still around 35 and change.
35 and change?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was just, do you have access to any data, or do you have access to an association that has any access to data? That
Yes.
says, gee, in a perfect world, this is how you build or fund a library. This is how much you spend on it. This is how many bodies you've got floating around, and they must gather it by, per capita data or per revenue data or something of that nature. I have no idea where the starting point is.
Yep, the starting point in Massachusetts would probably be the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. We do supply data to them annually as part of our certification as public library. I'd be happy to take a look at that for you and
Would you,
see
just
where
for
that
my own
falls.
personal curiosity?
Mhm.
I love reading junk like that.
No worries. I will, just from the seat of the pants, I can tell you that it varies. You can find a small library on Cape Cod with 2 people in it, and they're only open a dozen hours a week. this library would meet certification on hours if we were only open 15 hours per week. That would be like 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so nobody would come because we're never open. Currently, during COVID, we are open 32 hours a week. Normally, we're open 36, including some Saturday hours and evening hours, which are required by the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. So,
Would they
pardon?
also have data on various creative ways of funding for libraries? I mean, I don't know, like open sarcophagus tours or something like that to out of towners to bring in extra revenue, or, you know.
Yes, I came from a nonprofit organization, public library, so it was governed by a nonprofit organization that raised about 40% of its income, but that was in Lenox, Massachusetts. So I am not seeing quite the same potential in this community to raise revenue that way. However,
whatever data you could get your hands on would be that much more than I have right now.
Right now, we are in the midst of raising revenue. For example, the town has allowed us to waive overdue fines. Instead, we ask people to make a donation to the building fund. So where our fundraising efforts have gone, and the money generally goes to the Friends of Nahant Public Library, the Friends fund about 5% of our total revenue, primarily in programming, buying books for the summer reading program, for example, so that children can go home with a new book at the end of the program. They fund many of the featured speakers we have had throughout the year, those kinds of things. But they have designated a fund within the organization specifically to fund the building. This building is in sore need of repair, and I am right in the midst of looking for CPC funding and matching funds from the Mass Historical Commission. In the past, we used Mass Historical Commission funds, CPC funds, and Essex Heritage funds to rebuild the terrace that was in danger of collapse. So we're in an aging building that's had deferred maintenance for the last time any major repair was done here was in 1998. So money that's being raised right now is being turned toward the building more than anything. But we are still getting about 5% of our revenue through the Friends for operating costs, for programming costs primarily. So yeah, the answer is yes, we are fundraising all the time, or at least the Friends are.
Haven't you gotten some specific grants?
I'm sorry?
Haven't you gotten some specific grants, you know, program grants?
Yes. And thanks for the reminder. Currently, and I have a chart about that around here somewhere. Over the past 5 years, I've raised over $100,000 toward library programming, and there it is. Everything from, and it's over 500,000 when you include the 400,000 for CPC funding to repair the terrace and restore the terrace. A library inventory grant through the CPC. Let's see, the nature and the hunt work that we're doing now, dementia friendly, bringing in some of our seniors that have cognitive issues and their caregivers to come here once a month to have a wonderful time and stress-free time to laugh and enjoy and arts and crafts together. STEAM Everywhere, looking to enhance our nonfiction materials for young children here and at the school. All of Us technology grant, Stop Lyme, talking about Lyme disease in the community, and creating something that was a handbook that was actually used statewide. The 200th anniversary events, the Mass Memories Roadshow, where everybody in the community brought artifacts to put together into Digital Commonwealth, into one big archive, and the summer reading program. So all of those things put together over the past 5 years are equal to $548,619. And now some of that is CPC money, which is matched by, so it's your tax dollars matched by the state.
We like money that's matched. Everybody can match it. We take money from all sources.
And Jeff,
There
you
you go.
should, I'm sure you know this, but different towns have very different values around how much they, devote to libraries as cultural institutions. So although I'm sure there probably is state data based on just population data, there are also cultural values that differ from town to town, as you can imagine.
I think that's very true. I am the library I cut my teeth on was in Auburn, Maine, much more of a working class community. The reading level that was our peak reading level there was about 8th grade. So a large young adult collection, for example, in nonfiction, which very short, easy vocabulary, were intershelved with the adult nonfiction so that adults with low reading skills could find the topics that they needed in language that they could understand. This place I would much more qualify as a highly literate community. You're a bedroom community to Boston with a lot of people who work at MIT or Harvard, Boston University, other places. And so the reading level here that we focus on is generally undergraduate college, because that's where adults are reading here. We are expanding into, particularly in COVID, we've expanded our online offerings more. One of these grants helped get us in on a first year of a vast database of ebooks, audiobooks, and videos. This year, we've added another database of films and children's video offerings. So, but we have the people here who are savvy enough to jump over there, some with more coaching, some with less, and enjoy the online resources during COVID. So we have a 24/7 library in addition to the physical building, and it's a little safer in a pandemic.
Thank you.
Sharon, this is Dana again.
Sure.
Sorry to keep jumping in. If somebody else has some questions, I'll let them go first. But is it possible, I'm looking at your budget, is it possible you could put in there the benefits per person for the staff at the library as a line item there?
Just to give you that information, I mean, it doesn't become part of my operating budget, that it's matching funds paid for by the town.
Oh, okay. I guess, do you have it though? I mean, or is it?
I do not. I could get it from town hall. It's similar to something I ask for every year when I do a financial report to the state. So,
I don't know,
yeah.
maybe I should put it out to the rest of the FinCom. Do you guys think that this will be helpful information for us when we make our decisions?
So Dana, in the past, I don't think we've peppered Tony with this ask, but in the past, the FinCom has tried to parse that out, tried to ask the question of, there's line items within the town budget general fund that cover insurance and basically insurance. And we've asked to kind of aggregate the cost per department, and we haven't been very successful at that. But I think the question is a very good one, and much like Jeff has jumped on the kind of debt issue and trying to help us understand that, I think that's definitely an area that maybe it's a big ask for Sharon to come up with it for her department, but if we instead ask that to every department head, or as a collective entity tried to kind of parse that onion and understand it better, I think absolutely makes sense.
And
That
I,
said, John, is there any value, not any value, is there any reason to do that for this year's budget? Is that something that maybe then Tony and Allison take back and start beginning next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think it's way too late to kind of start. I would argue too late to kind of insert it into the budget conversation for this year,
I
but just
agree.
as a point of reference and to better understand the dynamics of the whole fiscal puzzle that is the town government. Yeah, I think it makes sense to maybe formalize the questions that we have and the answers that we would want over time.
I mean, I've heard numbers like 30, 40% of the position would be in benefits. Is that about right?
You mean the payroll burden?
Well, say, gross it up by 30 or 40%, then we'd hit where the total cost of the position might be.
Dana, this is Tony, and Allison's on here as well. She can speak a little to it, but the cost of health insurance, it changes every year, obviously, with the rates that we get from Maya. Generally speaking, you're looking at $10,000 to $20,000 per employee. So someone who comes on, well, actually, let me correct that. You're looking at $0 to $20,000, because naturally you could hire somebody that gets their health insurance through their spouse, through their family, and don't charge the town anything. You could have someone come on that is a single person plan, which is, that goes around $10,000, or you could be someone that is a family plan that could be anywhere around $20,000. Allison, would you concur with that?
Yeah. And so all of that is budgeted through, we have a line item for benefits that has already been presented to you as part of the town's budget. And that's where all of that cost lies. So it does not lie in the individual departments,
Okay.
like Sharon said. So department heads do not know what their employees have for health benefits. That would be something that would have to, that request would come through us.
Allison, what about retirement benefits? Is that something that we know about, or?
Yep. So retirement benefits, we pay an assessment to Essex County Regional Retirement System, and that assessment is based on an actuarial analysis that's done every year. So we know that as well. And that's also paid by the town, a separate line item. It's not part of any of the department's budget.
Okay, so we can assume, yeah, you've given us some ranges, so we can understand a little bit more about what the total cost of the position would be. And that's kind of what I'm trying to drive at. I don't need to know where every part of it goes, but, just an idea. Thank you.
just a reminder that, we're not talking about adding a position. We're only talking about increasing the total salary on a position. So whether or not
But
that
there
person,
isn't someone in that position that gets benefits right now, right?
we have, that position is unfilled currently, so there are no benefits or salaries being paid.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying. To give the picture of the FinCom, you could be looking at a new employee getting benefits,
Yes.
a new cost of benefits.
Right. If we go to pre-COVID, that position was filled and that person took benefits. Not as a full-fledged children's librarian, but as a library assistant. So at a lower salary, a lower percentage and so forth.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any additional questions for Sharon, or do we think we're ready to thank her and thank her very much for her effort to explain and help us understand tonight, and for everything she does with the passion and professionalism that she's absolutely become known for. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you listening to my long-winded explanations. I am passionate about what libraries can do to provide information and ideas to all ages and prepare them for the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, I'm looking at the agenda that we had, or I had sent to the clerk. So the one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that the town assessor is on the agenda, but she's unable to meet with us tonight. So that's going to be pushed likely till next week. So don't fear that we have a completely overloaded schedule with her not being here. Maybe we should next turn to Mark Paddock, who's here on behalf of the sailing program. Maybe we can he can give us a high-level view of the budget with respect to the program that he's the head committee member of, and we can go on from there. Again, I don't have the number right in front of me right now, but I know it's not more than $10,000. So maybe it will be just an ability for people to better understand how the program works and how it fits in the context of recreation.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much of the time. The number is 5,200 that Tony has put in for the town's, basically the town's contribution to our budget. I don't think it's quite enough, but we can live with it. So we don't have to spend hours on it. But basically, the way it works is we run the sailing program in the summer, usually for 6-7 weeks, plus setting up and taking down. All of the employees are part-time employees. They're all students, either college students or high school students. And we also have unpaid counselors in training. Last summer, we had to cut way back on the program. Of course, because of COVID, we weren't allowed to have more than one person in a boat unless they were family members. So we had to eliminate the whole beginner program, which is where we put several beginners, either beginner, both the adults or kids in a Rhodes 19. Because we had fewer, we really wanted to run the program and we wanted to be able to get the jobs to the kids. So we were able to pull that off. The director of the program, Olivia Fulgham, by the way, no conflict of interest here, did a fantastic job. We tried to manage within the budget. We estimated what we could get in tuition. We shortened the program by a week. We normally have 3 classes a week for the kids. We changed it to 5 classes every 2 weeks to reduce the hours and worked with that. Our contribution from the town last year was $5,000. We had asked for, I believe Tony originally had submitted 6,000, but FinCom cut it back to 5. We've managed for years, but the problem we're really getting hit with is the increase in minimum wage. So that we're looking at, we had about, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8 of our instructors, 7 of our 12 paid instructors were earning less than this year's minimum wage. So the minimum wage is jumping from $12.75 to $13.50. So that that's probably our biggest ongoing thing. So what we did last year, today, Allison and I reconciled our accounting because I'm within a few cents of where she is, so that's good. But basically, last year we had our total income, including the 5,000 from the town, was $19,471, and our wages were $18,148. We got my tuition was netting for some pay reimbursements. Allison counts those as expenses, but I took it out of the tuition. The town charges us for the gas. We get the town through the gas, so we save I get the gas through the town DPW, so we save money on that. And then we had another about $450 worth of parts. So we actually, looking at just that part, we came out positive by $780. However, the other reason that worked was that we have the nonprofit Friends of Nahant Sailing that's been gets donations from town members and through fundraisers and things. And they contributed about $1,200 toward all the extra supplies we needed because of COVID-19. We had to get extra sprayers, we had to get the masks, thermometers, whole bunch of other things. And the total estimated total cost of that was $1,200. The instructors basically swallowed any of their own personal expenses. Normally some of them would get reimbursed for travel when they have to drive all over buying supplies or taking some of the students up to Marblehead for Marblehead Race Week and things they would put in for mileage. It's not a big number, but it was kind of nice that any of the kids who had those expenses basically said, I'll donate it. And then same thing with members of the sailing program committee that did a lot of the repairs, particularly Eric Curtin, just bought whatever he needed and did it and swallowed that without donation and things like that. So we would have cost us more. And then in addition, because we wanted to try to have as much of a program as we could, we added lasers to the program by borrowing 5 or 6 from residents in town that had lasers. But the laser sailboat really is designed for somebody who weighs 160 or 170 pounds to sail them successfully. So our friends in Nahant Sailing bought the smaller rigs that are designed more for kids, so they're shorter rigs. So that was another $3,000, which we normally would consider it capital, but most of it's sort of a one-time thing because once COVID's over, we're not going to have much use for those. But that did allow a number of the students to move up a level of sailing, but they could sail alone in lasers. And some of the adults did the same thing, where they would have maybe gone out in normally they would have gone out in a 420, which requires 2 people. We couldn't put 2 in a boat unless they were family members. So lasers allowed us to keep some more of that program and the kids growing. So basically we kind of managed within the budget, thanks to Friends of Nahant Sailing. And looking at this coming year, we are determined to be able to somehow have the Rhodes 19s with probably at least 3 kids on a boat and maybe 1 instructor. We'll have to get approval from the town health people, but they are outdoors, they'll have masks, and we're hoping we can structure it that way because this is for the 8 and 9-year-olds. And we need to capture them or we lose them forever. So it's the kids that are going into 3rd grade and 4th grade. Heidi Fiore, who's on our committee, put together some Facebook and school announcements to gauge interest. And we've gotten 45 people back that say they want to do things. A lot of those are adults actually that want to do adult sailing, and then parents with kids that want to be in the program. So I think, going into this year, clearly we'll go back also to 7 weeks plus setup and takedown weeks. So the program will be longer. The kids will earn more money because of the increase in minimum wage. But I think that with the additional students, we should be able to balance the budget or come close to it. I would like to see the town contribution at 6,000. It would make it a lot, sure that we're going to make it. But if we have to live with the 5,200, we'll find a way to do it. That's any questions? By the way, I just want to mention, usually there's people on FinCom that are talking about how they were in the sailing program, but Tony was in the sailing program and Allison was in the sailing program. I don't know about the rest of you.
I went through it before sailboats were invented.
It's not too late.
I'd just like to just have a comment. I mean, I'd be generally supportive of that. It's such a modest amount and it probably brings a lot of benefit to the kids in town. I would be supportive of that.
I take it they don't have town class anymore or prams, sailing prams. That's
No,
what was
they
big-
don't have the
big
town
back
class anymore. We have the opties, single-handed opties, which for the small kids that are, that they want a single, a child can handle pretty well.
Yeah.
And then the 420s, which is the two-person boat. And then the Rose 19s are the big ones, but no more. Well, there is still a town class in town. I mean, Rex Antrim still goes off to the Nationals and Robert Wilson does, but it's not very active.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mark, for all you do and for being here tonight.
Yeah, and I think also agree. I mean, the sailing program it's sort of essential to who we are as a sea town. So I think it's great that you're doing it, Mark, and that it's something that we want to continue into the future. I mean, it really is essential to our identity as a sea town. We're an island.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I just say a quick thing?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say that, our intention with these numbers is not to squeeze the sailing program at all. The process we went through is we pulled the payroll records for the employees to see what rate they were at in July of last year, to see if they'd be impacted by the increase in minimum wage, and we didn't see that. I have higher hourly rate numbers in our payroll system, so than what Mark was just saying. So I think that maybe him and I should get together to make sure that the analysis is, line up. So it wasn't that we, neglected to look at it. We had them at rates that would not be impacted by the increase in minimum wage. So we just bumped it up a couple $100. But if we're wrong on that, then certainly we would be supportive of making an adjustment. I'm sure the Board of Selectmen would be too. I don't want to speak for them, but it doesn't seem like a huge amount.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Mark will be willing to kind of dive into the numbers with you and resolve that, and we'll go forward with whatever information you guys come to us with.
Great. Thank you.
So Tony, we also have, like the Council on Aging and Veterans Affairs. Do you just want to talk to those departments in general, or?
Sure. Generally speaking, we met with, so Council on Aging is probably one of the departments that has been funded almost primarily through COVID costs throughout this past fiscal year. So a lot of their expenses are paid for by an appropriated amount through grants and through Friends of Council on Aging. And this year, they didn't really use much of their appropriation or even their donation or grant money, because a lot of it was paid for, a bulk of it was paid for up until about this last quarter, was paid for out of COVID. So they are sitting in a pretty good spot as far as, obviously the appropriation from this past fiscal year doesn't roll forward, but all that money that they didn't tap into on grant or donations will roll over. So that they otherwise would have spent from. So they're actually in a pretty good spot going into next year. And Veterans Affairs, let me pull that one up. Veterans agent.
I can share, I have the budget worksheet in front of me. If people think it would be helpful, I can throw that up.
Yeah.
Can you, do you guys see an Excel spreadsheet now?
Yeah.
Yeah, veterans is just level funded except for the veterans agent salary is a 2% increase.
Yeah. So they didn't come with us. They didn't really ask for any additional money this year.
Okay. So it seemed like, you know, again, this recreation line item is I reached out to Jen McCarthy. They seemed okay with that. Sailing, we've heard
Is
from
that
Mark.
the latest number? Allison's shaking her head no.
No, okay, I'm sorry.
So if you pull I sent you guys an email today with some of the updated documents. We did make a budget adjustment on the rec program when we were looking through minimum wage impacts.
Okay.
So that's a little bit higher.
Tony, should we print that up and put it in the folder?
Yeah. Tony gave those things to me or sent them to all of us, and I attempted to dump them in the folder. I'm going to go look for it right now.
The online folder?
Yes.
How are you
It's
doing that?
it's also in your email. I think I sent it to
Yeah.
everyone.
Right.
Do you have two computers going?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I just have a different. I'm just sharing my screen, and my camera's still tuned on me, so it looks like I'm still paying
Just
attention.
very skilled.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to touch this thing, so I'll wipe out everything that's in front of me now. I didn't know I could do things on my computer.
Maybe you can keep talking while I try to find the right sheet.
Well, so the original budget for recreation, it was 3090. And then the latest budget revision, that was the level funded budget. And the latest budget revision is for 3,152, which is a 2% increase.
Okay.
So most of the time, you know, I know that Sharon was talking about how, you know, the minimum wage didn't increase by 2%, it increased by a certain increment. We, you know, some of our minimum wage employees that run summer programs fall into 2 different fiscal years, and therefore and into 2 different calendar years. So the reason we use 2% is because half of their, you know, anytime they work from July 1 to December 31st will be under this year's minimum wage in this year's upcoming budget. But then January 1st to June 30th, anytime they work in that part of the year, they're still in the same fiscal year, but they're have a higher minimum wage rate. So and some, you know, start in June, some don't start till July. So it's not always 2% pretty much covers it.
Is this the adjustment sheet you were asking me till 5?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. This is the adjustment sheet. So as you can see there, originally we had 3,090, and then on February 18th, the board voted to increase that because of the accounting that we did for minimum wage increases.
Okay.
But on the email I sent you, I think it's tab 3B is the title of it, I think. And that'll give you the full updated sheet.
All right, let me go find out.
That sheet there that you just pulled up is our way to, you know, really highlight the changes that were made in a follow-up meeting.
Got it. And now I have overwhelming number of tabs open in front of me. I got to make sure I open the right thing. 3B. Okay, so I think this is the new one. Sorry.
Yep.
I just don't want to fly past it. Okay, there we are. So there we are. Okay, so we just talked veterans, library.
Yeah, so if you look,
tennis.
column J,
Yep, yeah,
3152.
yep, got it.
So yeah, so the recreation program, which is also, is funded somewhat through the recreation revolving account, which this past year, didn't really see a lot of money come out of it because they didn't do any park league. And I'm not sure if they're going to do park league again this year. We're still kind of waiting to see what happens with COVID restrictions. So but this number, I think Jen probably, I doubt she said she was looking for any change to it.
Yeah. Okay, and then all the other historical Memorial Day, 4th of July, beautification, all that seems good. I guess the last item in culture and recreation is the military housing, and that seems like that's essentially level funded and flat.
Yeah.
And again, that purchase of services that's the money we pay the hall company to manage the property?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any questions in this bucket?
What is the, this is Dana, on the hall company managing the military housing, what does that include? The 80,000?
Soup to nuts. I mean, we don't get involved in really any of the details over there. So whether it means, collecting payment and making deposits to the town, whether it means, responding to, structural issues, whether, a boiler went or a roof that's leaking, to when an apartment comes available, they do it all. So we keep an arm's length from that. They will reach out to me. They have reached out to me since I've been here when they've had a boiler go, and ask, what do you want to do here? Here are our options. And
So
they'll
would the
consult
town
with me
pay
about
for the
that.
boiler, Tony? In theory?
It ends up, the way that it works is, I think they pay for it and reduce the amount that they give us collected through rent. So they pay us, so basically they do it on their end because we don't have an appropriation for, a lot of money, a ton of money to make $10,000 worth of improvements or whatever in a given year. So it's easier for them to just kind of offset the amount of rent that they provide the town. Does that sound right, Allison? I think I got that right.
Yeah, so hall management does all of the accounting on their end. And then basically what they give me as a town accountant is just a report every month. And I'll adjust our books to match theirs. But they do everything. And yes, if there's a purchase, they're deducting it from that month's rent that they're providing to the town.
Allison, this is
Really
Dana,
one of
just
the
a couple more
reasons why we
follow-up
talk
on that.
about, I'm
Um,
sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to follow up on that point about the insurance, and I'll yield the floor to whoever wanted to speak there, but does the hall company carry insurance, or does the town carry insurance in case there's a leak in the underground oil tanks?
No, that would be well, at least from the Coast Guard Committee, we learned that that's the town's responsibility.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. So we do have, we fund some insurance line items, and I just don't know if this falls under one of them.
Okay.
I'd have to
Yeah,
look
I'd
at
have to
that.
look a little bit closer.
Yeah.
I think I've seen um, underground storage tanks itemized in our plan, in our binder. But I'd have to give you a good answer, Dana, I'd have to look closer at it.
Mhm.
Just to add some color to that comment, I mean, an individual homeowner can add a rider to their annual insurance bill, and it's like $25 and covers if there's any leak of an oil leak into the groundwater. So, I mean, I think that's going to be helpful to the town as we consider removing those houses and digging up the oil tanks, because if we dig up an oil tank, we found that it's leaked into the groundwater, that you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost. So I don't, I'd like to see some kind of insurance there on that.
I think we have it because it's not the only property that has underground storage tanks. We have fuel storage at the DPW. We have fuel storage at the Ward Road Pump Station. So I think that I'm pretty sure we do have insurance on it, but I would want to just triple check the plan to make sure, I'm answering your question properly.
No, that's good. Thanks, Tony. If we could check on that. I mean, I think that's going to be really helpful as we move through the Coast Guard housing article in the warrant. And I yield the floor back.
I was going to say thank you. I didn't know that they had insurance that did that. That's very interesting. Part of the, we see a revenue line from Hull, but really there is it's a small amount compared to what we're. So when we talk about the revenue from the from the Coast Guard housing, it's not just it's offset by the expense of the management company taking care of it. And then the fact that anytime somebody moves out, we have to refurbish the buildings. And so there's a lot of expense as well. It's not just revenue. So it's the pressure behind us to make a decision on the Coast Guard housing, because the houses are they were temporary. 60 years later, they were only supposed to be temporary.
Okay, so I guess we've kind of gone through the culture and recreation, the full profile of things on the budget and questions to ask. So I guess we can kind of circle back just in general. Tony, do you want to just tell us about the recent changes or in the
Sure.
warrant?
Sure. So we had some unappropriated funds that we were, using to build up future free cash with, an understanding and an expectation that revenues are going to take a hit, continue to take a hit for the next fiscal year at least, and maybe 2 fiscal years due to the pandemic. So plus, we have had, part of our goal here has been to not utilize all of our free cash to balance our budget. That's part of our long-term goals. So we had, this is something that we had last year that we were really excited about. And then we put it in the reserve fund because of the pandemic that hit. And luckily, thank God we did. And then of course, one of the beautiful things about that is if it's not spent, it drops to free cash anyways. Similar here, what we did was we took that extra funds that we had and we put it into debt. So some of the conversation that we had in the last meeting, and then plus Allison and I spoke with our financial advisors about our debt service and what we have coming due, or how much we have to pay this upcoming year, led us to this decision. And again, similarly, we can decide at the end of the fiscal year, when we have a better idea of how much free cash we will see in the upcoming fiscal year, we can make a decision, an informed decision at that time. Should we put this extra money towards paying down principal on our longest term, highest interest outstanding debt? Or does it look like we're going to need that free cash potentially for capital expenditures or other things in the upcoming years? So let it drop. Similar type of mindset there. So just trying to pull up my numbers here. Our minimum debt due for the upcoming fiscal year is $640,687. $640,687. We had about, I think we had like an extra $20,000 on top of that. So prior to this change that you guys just got from the Board of Selectmen, we had budgeted around, let's say, $660,000. And actually, if I pull that, I can tell you the exact number. Or John, if you pull up a
change sheet.
Yeah.
It was 661,274 that we had originally budgeted.
Okay, 661. So now we're budgeted 816,310. So that leaves us an addition, for what our minimum requirement that we're supposed to spend, which is inclusive of both principal and interest, of 640. With this change, we now have an additional 175,623 to put towards, we would put it towards principal of debt that has the highest interest rate. So, this is part of, this is a healthy expense of free cash, using free cash to build up your reserves, one-time capital needs, or paying down outstanding debt. So this is this falls in line with our goals. And like I said, we still have some flexibility at the end of the year. If say we, are looking slim on upcoming fiscal year free cash, we could say, okay, maybe we don't spend, and we don't, spend all of this extra 175, and we let it drop into the next, the next free cash cycle.
Yes.
So that's it on as far as column E. That's the only change that occurred in the budget that occurred at the last Board of Selectmen meeting.
The one thing I'll say on the debt, so Jeff has been working diligently with tremendous help from Tony and Allison to kind of wrap his head around the dynamics of the town's debt. And he's come up with some really nice ways, or they have come up with some really nice ways of, conveying that data. So Jeff, you want to talk about that a little bit? We'll make sure that all those documents are shared with everybody very soon. We just wanted to make sure all the final numbers that Jeff was playing with were the right numbers, but it seems
I
like
got to give credit where credit is due. Allison took all of my semi-real numbers and made them real numbers, which I appreciate immensely. And I like what you did with the charts. Came back nicer than I sent it to you.
yes. So we'll make sure that those get shared in the files, and we can talk more about them in the future. But thanks very much to you, Jeff and Tony.
No, I got to thank you. You came up with some great ideas. I was just thinking of a big picture type of scenario, trying to see what our ratio was, but breaking it down into the buckets and I'm getting a better understanding of this. There's a lot of levels to this step thing. I never heard of Rands, Bands, Fans, and Sands before, but now I know they exist.
Hmm.
I take it bands is something that we use on an interim before we actually, what do we bundle?
So bands are short-term borrowing where basically they're on a one-year basis. So you get the cash up front and then you can continue to roll the band so they can stay outstanding year after year and you just pay a small interest on them. The thing that's nice about bands is that you can pay them down year over year and then just continue to pay that small
So
interest
it's like a
cost.
line of, it's a line of credit that you can
Pretty
pay off.
much, yeah. And it's not, it's different than long-term bonds, whereas, you know, you're not going to have that fixed debt schedule of principal and interest payments over a 10 or 20-year period, and you're kind of stuck with that. The town has had a history of paying down bands more quickly than a fixed long-term debt, and that's provided the town with more flexibility.
Is there anything in either the ban itself or the authorization for borrowing that requires you to turn it into long-term debt at some point?
No, nope. And so a lot of the town's borrowing has not turned into long-term debt. We've just borrowed as bands and have paid the bands down.
Okay, but when we look at that debt schedule,
Yeah, so
that debt schedule sort of assumes it was borrowed long-term, or how do we see
Yeah,
some?
so that debt schedule that I had shared previously, I inherited from Debbie, and
Right.
I had to sit with it for a while because I was having a hard time following it. After meeting with our financial advisors, I revised it. The one I actually provided to Jeff, and I separated it into one spreadsheet of just long-term debt and a second one of all the short-term bands.
Now I understand it.
And it just shows technically the interest payments that are due on the bands. I think what Debbie tried to show before was if those bands did turn into long-term debt, what those principal and interest payments would be. So it is a little bit confusing, and that's not necessarily what we owe each year on those.
So really, you're at the risk of interest rate volatility,
Correct.
basically.
Yep.
What is the typical interest rate on a ban, or does it, I mean, is there such a thing? Does it depend on the amount or?
No, I mean, it depends on the town's credit rating, and obviously the interest rate environment. But I think the ones that we have now, I mean, they're fairly low. I'd have to look at each individual one. I don't have it right in front of me.
Okay.
Are the bans, are they tied to individual borrowings or warrant authorization? So you can
Yes,
look in
they
and say,
are.
okay, this ban belongs to Article 27 in the 2000 and, you know, whatever, the '07 meeting. Okay.
Yep. Yep. So it's, you know, there's an individual ban for each project that's authorized by town meeting.
Which is why when I looked in the cell content, there was a bunch of numbers that added together. Each one of those had to have been a warrant article or one particular.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way that I've broken it out on the spreadsheet, each line is every separate article that was approved by at former town meeting.
This is where my rookie part comes in now. When dealing with just banks, I understand debt to equity and debt covenants and that sort of stuff. But when it comes to town finance, it looks like we're hovering around the 1-to-1 area, $1 of revenue to cover $1 of debt. Is that, where does that put us in if we were to look at it from the overall health? Is that something to be worried about, or is that just something that says, no, we're good?
So I've never really looked at it that way. The credit rating agencies, and you have to go before a credit rating agency each year in order to
Yeah.
borrow. Yeah. So the town, I believe, uses Moody's. When I was in Marblehead, we used Standard & Poor's. So you have an annual meeting with, one of those credit rating agencies where you go over everything from the management of the town to, you share all your financial reports, the liquidity and your ability to pay down debt.
Is that the Brown's 10-point test?
No, it's a little bit different. I actually don't have a copy of the town's latest credit report. But one of the major things that they look at is your annual debt service. So I've never actually looked at it in the manner that you have, in which you're looking at total outstanding debt compared to one annual appropriation and revenue. So what the credit rating agencies usually look at is what your actual debt service for that one particular year is versus the revenue.
What I'm trying to come up with is Tony is doing a great job, and he's got a very aggressive capital budget going between sewer, water, my fixation with stormwater management, the public, what is it called? Public safety building. There's like this ton of pent up capital needs going forward. And I'm saying, okay, so in your line of business, the only way of funding that is through revenue. So I'm thinking, well, if we can create little revenue buckets so that we can flip the switch when the need comes that oh man, the pipe blew up, we got to do this now, we can't do it 3 years from now. You got to have a mechanism for pumping up your revenue to respond to that. And then you can turn the spigot back off once that need goes away. That's where my fixation with revenue comes from, Tony. I know that you're planning on doing this stuff. And quick calculation in my head, there's a lot coming down the pike. I can look and see now that when Coast Guard housing gets resolved, well, there's a big $1.866 million chunk of debt that disappears out of that equation. So that's going to drop that line down on nearly $2 million once that goes down. Well, that frees up liquidity for maybe addressing some other
Yes.
longer term capital
Yes.
budget. So you can say, hey,
Yes.
we can do this going forward because we got it available. That's where I was going, or what I was trying to put a picture 2 years in front of us. And John, I think it was either you or it was Bob that said something that gives us a window so that we can plan what are we going to do to manage this thing going ahead and not get stuck in a liquidity trap, Anyway.
Because I don't remember exactly when, but I mean, the school falls off in the next, I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
I saw
2 or
that.
3 years, so that's another piece that goes away.
Yeah, so I think it was me. I think it's more than 2 years. It's probably more like 10 years. But if we can build on what's been done here and push it out into the future, that would give you an idea of what your borrowing capacity is as you go out. And to Jeff's point, that how do you slot in the various needs that we know are coming our way. We've still got a big sewer project to finish off. There's been almost perpetual talk of a public safety building of some sort. So forth. So, I'm not sure where to take that other than can we take what Jeff and Allison have done and just push it out into the future. Just say, okay, let's assume revenues grow at 2.5% a year, and let's assume that debt retires per per whatever its schedule is. And bands sounds like will be kind of interesting to figure out. But that will be a declining number, and the difference between those two is theoretically kind of capacity for new debt.
Something that, we're gonna work on over the summer with Allison, and one of the shining marks of her experience is financial forecasting for the town of Marblehead. So, you look at, there are costs that are somewhat known when you're developing that financial forecast. And there are some revenues that are somewhat known. And then there's a bunch of stuff that fluctuates from year to year, right?
Yep.
So,
only too well.
right. So you kind of start on the other side of, okay, here's what we know we have to pay down over the next couple of years. Here's what we can most accurately predict our, personnel costs moving forward based on contract, based on, estimating a COLA. There's a way to kind of forecast that stuff out. And then there's this leftover piece of the puzzle, which can paint somewhat of a picture for you as to what is your borrowing capacity in the upcoming years. But as you know, like every year you could, something new may come up and add a new a new borrowing may come up that you don't predict 3 years from now, so which may impact your 10-year forecast. So that's something that, we're excited to work with, have Allison on board to help, help us work that out. Obviously it won't, like I said, there's a lot of variability there, but it does get to, I think, where you guys are heading. And then I would just say that, if the general question that you were starting out to say, Jeff, was, are we healthy now? Are we at a point where are we over borrowing? Are we overextending ourselves? I would say no. I would say yes, we are healthy. We are, our bond rating is good because we're putting a ton of money, or more money than we ever have towards building up our reserves, liabilities that those credit agencies look at. And, like I just said, with the budget that's in front of you right now, we're actually appropriating more, than the minimum that we need this year that we're required to pay down. So I think it's a larger kind of philosophical question about how you budget, and really maintaining that employment, that, personnel cost compared to revenue limitations on a year-to-year basis is a key starting point. But I think we're in a good place right now, the way that the town has been doing it each year, providing enough flexibility that the town has been able to pay down, extra principal than the minimum. Now, I guess what I'm not answering is, well, how much more capacity do we have? But that fluctuates, we're using extra free cash. We're using free cash that extra amount that we're appropriating is out of free cash. So you don't know yet how much free cash you're going to have next year.
Yeah, but over 5 years, or averaged over 5 or more years, you can get a good sense.
Yeah, until a pandemic comes along and
Right,
throws a wrench in that plan.
Right.
but
Exactly.
Yeah, yes, but yes, you're right, Bob.
No, and you're right too.
Well, we were 3 years ago, we were seeing a $100,000 to $200,000 decrease in free cash on an annual basis. And then when the pandemic hit, in March, we froze spending, at the end of the fiscal year which ended up leading to more free cash in the coming up for the upcoming fiscal year. So that was like an unexpected blip in the radar. Now we're being told to, continue to estimate a reduction in revenues for the next 2 fiscal years. But we don't know. Every town's different. We're structured different than other towns, and we'll see how it works out. But you're right. You can reasonably estimate that amount.
Tony, one of the metrics that they brought up in this Lincoln whatever was revenue per capita, and they came up with this 10-point test, and I was curious. You seem very aware. Gee, I don't want to go too high here. But I don't want to raise too much prices over here because I don't want to put too much burden on this particular thing or that particular thing. And is there a way through this revenue per capita of finding out? We know what our per capita is, what our population is. We can figure out what our revenue is, and that's got to give us a number. And how do we relate revenue per capita compared to other cities and towns in Massachusetts? Are we on a high end? Are we on a low end? Because in my head, I'm saying, well, we have capacity. We have limits, debt limit. We have revenue generating limits, and I'm not comfortable knowing where we are at this stage of the game. And that's why I've been doing so much reading and trying to get together so that I can figure out what our capacity is moving forward. Because if something does come down the road, well, somebody's going to look toward you primarily, and hopefully we can help to come up with answers of what can we do now to fix this thing going forward.
I would guess you would end up being on the high end because our primary source of revenue is property tax. While our tax rate is low compared to the rest of the county, our bills are about average because our values are so high. And then obviously we don't have a lot of people in town, so compared to those other communities. So I would guess he'd be, I don't know, middle to high on that. I'm not sure. Be interesting to do that analysis.
I came from Andover, and I looked and I said, boy, if this is a haven here. Their property taxes are somewhere up in the stratosphere. I think they're out in left field, but then they don't have the same, we have MWRA, we have Lynn WRA. I paid money on my septic system in the backyard. That's where my cost went. And I could get supplemental well water if I didn't want to pay the town water. So the different towns have different structures, but there's got to be a way of comparing to see where we stand.
So if you take that 10-point test that you were talking about, you'll get your per capita revenue per capita, but it doesn't rank you compared to the rest of the state. You would need everybody's.
And if I could get us in a ranking to find out, well, just what our capacity is, then you've got an idea. You may, gee, we got this real big project coming up, but you know what? We don't have the capacity to raise that type of revenue. We got to go to the cherry sheet and see if the state can't put more money, or can we reach the feds to get some more money from the feds, because we only have so much internal capacity before we start setting off bells and whistles. Anyway, that's
It's interesting, Jeff. I just looked up really quickly because I know the Department of Revenue does a lot of statistical analyses, and revenue per capita is one of them.
It is.
So yeah, so I can send you a link. It shows the
Oh,
whole,
I would like that.
yeah, the whole state. It's by community. it's a little bit dated. It looks like the data is from 2018, but that is a statistic that they take a look at.
And I wonder if they compare that per capita with average, income.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, the
Have a
average
bunch of
income
data
of
on here.
Andover maybe in the mid six figures
Mm,
versus the average income for Nahant is a different economic
Right.
environment. So
But they must do something, Jeff, because I saw a couple years ago about revenue for Nahant was one of the few towns where the revenue, oh, not revenue, I'm sorry, that was the salaries. The average income had gone down, considering all the other areas where the average income has gone up, but Nahant had gone
you
down.
mean
And I
for the
guess that's
population,
because, pardon me?
you mean the average income of the population.
Yes. And
It's
I would
probably
imagine, or,
we're all
because
getting older.
right, because we're not a young community, and many of us are retired. So, but that was an interesting statistic that stuck with me because it showed that around us, average income was going up, but we were not.
Hmm. But from where I come from, I don't get afraid of statistics. I sort of, the more information I've got allows me to set my expectations that says, well, I'm not going to set my expectations up here because the reality of where we are, we're down, our budget is somewhere down here. So to me, information is power. And that's all I'm trying to do is gather as much information as I can to help you folks. I'm I'm not in the kitchen. You guys are, you got the
Hugely
heat of the
helpful
kitchen.
to us,
You got
Jeff.
to
I
run
mean,
it.
so thank you. I mean, it certainly helps me out what we learn here. And Tony, you made an interesting statement a little bit earlier that um, you're supposed to plan for a revenue decrease for the next couple of years, but it's interesting. We don't have any income other than property taxes. I would imagine that we're going to hold steady.
Allison, you and I just spoke about this the other day, and I think that's in one of the tabs that I sent over to you guys is our revenue projections.
So Judy, you're correct in that most of our revenue is from property tax, and we're predicting the 2.5% increase by, proposition 2.5. It's the local receipts that we're talking about going down in many instances. And so that would be, I don't know, like beach stickers and, other fee revenue that we get that's deposited to the general fund, as well as state aid we're predicting to be level funded. So
Yeah.
overall, with the 2.5% increase in property tax revenue, with the decrease in local receipts, we're predicting, I think it was like a 0.5% increase.
1.6.
Okay.
So you have call it three buckets of revenue. Your real estate and personal property, we're estimating 2.5% on that. Obviously, we that's what we do every year. Our local receipts, we're actually estimating a 3.2% decrease. Our cherry sheet, we're looking at a 0.2% increase. So it totals at 1.6, where in the past, our total, I think we estimated around 2 or 2.5. So
Do you think the local receipts, because last summer we made additional money on, didn't we have an increase in like tickets? Like there were some local receipts that we actually showed an increase.
Yes, we had a big increase in tickets.
We did have a big increase in tickets. But there are rules as to how you estimate your upcoming fiscal year's revenues, and that would have had to be, I think it's too soon to include that in our prediction. I think you have to have that kind of 2 years of revenue before you can really bake that into your prediction for the upcoming year. Because they don't want you to plan a budget on a whim of a blip of increased revenue. So like, for instance, our local meals tax that we adopted, remember we adopted that 2 town meetings ago. Well, it went into effect in December, or no, maybe like October, November. And this past fiscal year was gonna be, a year of data that we could then bake into next year's revenue projections. But then DLS came back to us and said, don't include it because of COVID, essentially. Because it wouldn't be enough of data for you to really plan on. So, we definitely did take a hit though. We had, more outstanding utility bills than we have in the past. That ended up being lean towards property taxes. And I think we had more, property taxes unpaid than we ever have in the past. It wasn't significant. It didn't break the bank, but we definitely noticed an impact.
Yeah.
It's 9 o'clock. The other thing that I sent over to you guys was the updated warrant. I just wanted to just quickly state that the changes there are moving the Coast Guard housing up.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. I moved MWRA down to try to help with, not moving too many, like having a trickle down effect of all your worksheets and spreadsheets as to, what articles are at what number. We included language for the marijuana local tax. We just posted a meeting for Thursday night. Judy, if you want to join us, if you want to call in, the Board of Selectmen, we're going to discuss Article 30, which is the marijuana bylaw. So we actually that's a zoning bylaw, so it's got to go to the planning board before it goes to town meeting. So we are going to discuss the language of that and vote to send it to the planning board, or decide to hold off for this year. So that might be, I know you were assigned to those two. So if you want to join us Thursday night.
What time is that, Tony?
6:30 by Zoom.
Thank you very much.
It's the only thing on the agenda too, so it won't be long.
All right, thank you.
And then I put in a placeholder for the Board of Selectmen's sponsored lowlands stormwater article. We are currently crafting language for that, and then also putting together a presentation to sit down with Christine to talk to her about, the language and the idea of what we're doing. And then the other thing I just let you know that may be coming is the Max. I forget his last name now. I'm so embarrassed. He's a Swampshot High School student. He presented at the Board of Selectmen meeting last Thursday a plastic bag ban proposal. So we are working with him. The Board of Selectmen are in favor of including it in the warrant. It would essentially impact our local businesses and eliminate the use of plastic bags. We're one of 5 communities on the coast that do not have a plastic bag ban in place. It was a great presentation, so that'll be there. He was in the town hall working with town council on the specific language, and we'll be putting that in front of the selectmen soon too.
He did a great job with his presentation.
He did. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Tony.
You're welcome.
I don't know. Does anybody have any? I think CPC is in theory up for next week. I haven't cross-checked. I don't know if anybody else has to see if they're
I-
going to be ready.
I sent a note to Lynn just earlier this afternoon,
Okay.
but I've not heard back.
Okay. And Sheila, the assessors and the team of the assessors may hopefully be ready to meet with us next week so we can put that on the agenda. But I guess we'll finalize next week's agenda over the next couple days and get the meeting posted by Friday. And everybody, you know, we touched a little bit on the website. It's not perfect in that it's not individually password protected, but it's protected at least so only those of us who have the link can access the files. Was everybody able to access it, and did it work as you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah. So
Now, we can go in there and look at, but you don't want us editing anything in there, right?
So, yeah, I mean, I think we should think of it as just a place to store documents, you know, like your, you know, wonderful spreadsheets and Excel files. We'll definitely dump those in. I guess we have to think a little bit about that. I mean, we can't collectively edit things offline. So it's more just going to be a place where we store the documents that we all can reference, and then we can figure out another way to
I
edit.
noticed that Allison has version control on hers, which is good. You have a naming convention, and each one has a different version, so we know which one is you don't kill the older version. You
Yeah.
just up the
Yeah.
number.
You know
Which
what?
is
Yeah,
good.
so for all of mine, sorry, I have a footer that automatically updates with the date of the last revision. And I did that on purpose because I always keep the history because you have to refer back to it.
Okay, I don't know if I fully understand what you're saying, but I'll go in and look at your versions and see if I can pick up from you and learn some tricks. But I think that makes sense, Jeff, to have some convention, whether it's automatic or something that we introduced that tracks versions. But I think your idea of, yeah, not going in there and deleting files and putting new ones in, instead add, at least for now, additional files that are subsequent versions so that we can go back and
As far as open meeting law goes, you can download a document from that cloud storage.
Yeah.
To your, and work on it on your own.
Yeah.
You can send it back to the committee, but you just can't deliberate on those changes. You can say, hey, I took a crack at writing this recommendation. Here it is. Talk to you at the next Tuesday.
Right.
And just nobody else, you shouldn't respond saying, I like what you did there. How about do this? How about do that? You don't want to do that. That's all open meeting law violation, but you can certainly work on your own. You can always send it ahead of time to be prepared for a meeting.
Mm-hmm. All right, so at least it sounds like once we get the naming convention figured out, then
OneDrive will keep a version history for you.
okay.
If you right click on a file, you can choose version history and it'll show you basically every time it was saved. Since we're all logging in with the same link, we may not be able to tell who it was because it thinks everybody's the same.
Right.
But at least you've got a little bit of a trail of prompts there.
Are you saying, Bob, that you can still access the old versions even if you do change it? Is that, or you're just?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I'll look into that, but for now, nobody should be deleting any files, but add files to the buckets that you think make sense to add them to, if that.
I'm sorry, Tony, one more time. The meeting is on Thursday, but I can't find a link, any information about it on the website.
I saw an email to the webmasters asking to get it posted, but I haven't checked the community calendar. Let me take a look.
It has to go out tonight, right? Or they can't.
It would have, right, it would have had to be posted already. I don't see it there.
Thanks, Michelle. I couldn't find it either. Although, though I do find the website to be a bit of a challenge sometimes.
So I will, it looks like we're probably not going to be meeting on Thursday night.
All
I'll
right.
keep you posted.
All right, just let me know because I would like to go to that one. Thank you.
Yes.
What was Thursday night? I think I fell asleep or something.
Nothing.
At a Board of Selectmen meeting?
Well, theoretically, there's
Not
going to be a
anymore.
board, but it's not been posted.
Oh, okay.
One of the struggles we have with the current website.
I thought we were up, I thought we were further along.
The goal is to launch our new website July 1.
Oh, not until then, dang it.
There's a lot of data on the old website that, it's a long process.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Just as a side note, Tony, I tried to access a bunch of old financial reports. The links aren't there. I get a 404. I can't. So I gave up. I
Mhm.
figured it was my computer.
We may have them, electronically. If you're looking for stuff, we may have them, and we can.
Allison provided all of the
Okay.
corrected data.
Hey, so speaking about the warrant and the articles that we're going to comment on from FinCom, what's the process we're going to use to say negotiate or to work with individual committees on the content of the articles? Do those committees own the language and we comment on it, or do we work with the committees and maybe have some edits? I guess that's the Bob or John or all of us, I guess.
Well, the process in the past has been that whoever is assigned the article is responsible for writing the recommendation. The entirety of the FinCom votes on the article, and it's the author's responsibility to write the recommendation in the tone, in the tone of the committee's discussion of that article, whether or not you happen to agree with the recommendation or not. Is that fair, John?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. But I think, Dana, you're maybe also be asking about actual wording of articles that we want to maybe influence or affect.
Exactly. That's right, John. That's what I was trying to get at. Are these
There might
articles
be a
just for us to
minority.
comment on, or can we suggest or work with the individual committee to work on
The
articles?
proponent of the article also can submit language that they want published in the book. And there's a limit to the amount of words, which I've forgotten.
But Dana again is speaking to the actual article itself, right? Correct?
Okay. I'm
Correct.
So
answering the wrong question then.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
the
isn't the
board-
articles, aren't the articles done?
Yeah,
the
but the Board of Selectmen or the citizens petitions control the language of their articles, and the selectmen control the language of the other articles. Correct, Tony?
Yes, and CPC controls the language of their articles.
But we as a finance committee, we can't touch the language of the article itself.
Unless the Board of Selectmen have the ability to open the warrant, make changes to their articles. Prior to it going to getting posted. Technically, you ideally want to get any changes figured out before it goes to print, so that everybody that gets the book at their house has an accurate, up-to-date
Yes.
warrant. But technically, you can make changes up to 15 days prior, because it needs to be posted 14 days prior. And then obviously on town meeting floor is a whole nother procedure.
Right before the town meeting, I'm thinking, possible edits or suggestions to the language of the individual articles?
If it's citizen petition,
Yeah, we're stuck there. We can't touch that.
you're pretty much stuck. And even more so this year because of the awkwardness of them being rolled over from a previous year. But if it's Board of Selectmen articles, if you have requested changes, I can bring them back. I can bring those to the Board of Selectmen for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
So are we at
Tony,
the,
one question then. Tony, what happened with the citizen petition that we talked about last week?
So I put in a placeholder for a Board of Selectmen sponsored article regarding stormwater in the lowlands. And we're currently working on that language. It'll be for $100,000, the same amount. It'll be to borrow for it. And, you know, the language is going to be more general, but still encompass, you know, the same intent of the citizen petition, but provide the town more flexibility. You know, I know what I would like to have it say, but I think it's important to, you know, work with Christine and make sure that she's comfortable with the language as well, as best as we can come to an agreement. And so we're working on those details.
Am I correct that there might also be something coming in from the CPC because the planning board is also talking about some kind of lowlands?
They're looking at the planning board submitted an application to CPC
Right.
for an ecological restoration
Right.
study.
Yeah, so that might be coming in as well, right?
If CPC were to approve it.
Right.
Well,
But
what-
I'll be speaking with Lynn, you know, let her know what we're doing with our article and what the town's doing. And, you know, as I mentioned at the last meeting, I don't want to speak for CPC, but I put in for money and this isn't like sour grapes or anything. I just remember that there were eligibility issues with funds going towards the ditch system, because even though it would benefit open space and recreation, it wasn't direct cost or direct expenditure on open space or recreation. So, you know, unless the CPC has a change of heart there, I don't know if it'll make it through the process.
But Tony, where did they come up with, the Board of Selectmen come up with 100,000? What does that mean? What's it for? Where'd the number come from?
There's a whole list of solutions that you can consider when dealing with stormwater, you know, issues in that area. And with $100,000, we could put the project that we have designed, that we would like to permit and construct, is going to be somewhere around, you know, $40,000 to $50,000. The ditch dredging work that we did over the past year with mosquito control, we can estimate, you know, what that's going to cost for the next, you know, critical piece of that system. And then a little extra money on top would go towards things like cleaning storm drains, making repairs to any pipe or catch basins. Hydrology studies, another big issue there. So it's not just one thing, it's having the ability to, and by borrowing for it, we're not required to spend that money in the upcoming fiscal year. So we can kind of take it in pieces like we did the last 175.
I know, Tony, but here's the thing. I'd have problems being for a borrowing that we don't really haven't specifically figured out what the actual costs are, or because that was we talked about with the citizens petition, right? Where did that number come from? And so that's a pretty specific number for where we haven't really any basis of what it is or what we're going to spend it on. It's a fishing number.
I mean, all borrowing, I mean, pretty much all borrowing articles are up to amounts, right? So you don't have to borrow the full 100. But I would say that, for the project that we have in mind, plus the ditch dredging work that is going to need to be done, we could easily be at 80,000. So, and there's still a long list of other needs related to stormwater repair work in the area. So, I see your point. I see your point, Judy. I was just, I could spend $1 million on stormwater, throughout town if I had it. So it's hard to really pinpoint, a specific number.
I think that was my point. I mean, it's just storm management. It should be part of the infrastructure of what we do, and so to call it out as a specific warrant with unspecified, oh geez, it's late, unspecified, nothing we can point to and whistle, I guess, as I want to say, is a concern.
I think so Christine was part of the 175 that was put in the town meeting warrant in April of 2018. And it was kind of a random number that listed a bunch of different uses. And it was very flexible. And so I think that's probably where she is coming from, of, providing that same, dollar amount with some flexibility. Because, I mean, priorities do change, you never know what the next winter brings and what type of damage, you're facing. So things do change, they do move on the list. So that's why, our biggest issue with the current citizen petition is how specific the language is. It doesn't provide a lot of flexibility right now.
Another thing that we need to do is loop back with the petitioners. Be sure they're on board with what's going
on. Yeah, I'm on a distribution list with that entire neighborhood. So, I could do a Zoom meeting with all of them, talking about what we're moving on or what we're trying to accomplish.
Cool.
Great. Thank you.
Is there anything else before we move to community input, if there is any? All right, then I guess I'll ask the handful of folks that are here. Do you guys have any need or desire to address the committee? I'm assuming they can unmute themselves, right, Bob? So I guess the answer is no.
I think so.
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. All right, then I guess, like I said, we'll firm up the agenda for next Tuesday, but I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second, Beatty.
That
Fulgham,
was
aye.
Brown who moved, and then Zohora seconded.
Okay. I'm in favor, Beatty.
Brown, aye.
Vanderslice, aye.
Fulgham, aye.
Tarmy, aye.
Zohar, aye.
Sounds like the ayes have it.
Mhm.
Enjoy the spring-like weather, guys.
Oh, yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
gonna be
Thank you.
beautiful tomorrow, right?
Get out while we can. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night. Thank you,
Good
everyone.
night. Thanks.
Good night.